today I'm reading from chapter 16, The Accident. Hello friends, welcome back to Riverwood Cabin. I'm Rosie Boom and I'm reading to you from Where Lions Roar at Night, the fun and adventures of a pioneering New Zealand family. This is the first book in the Barn Chronicles series. And today I'm reading from chapter 16, The Accident. Well, I seem to have finally closed up all the holes, said Dad one morning at breakfast. No little visitors for some time now. He looked up at his socks stuck in the rafters. Or maybe our makeshift scarecrow works, eh? Mum smiled. I kind of miss the sparrows inside, but yesterday I saw some beautiful swallows swooping around the porch. They must be looking for a place to build their nests. Dad groaned. Oh, I don't really want swallows either. They make such a mess. Come on, Dad, exclaimed Millie. They're so cute. Remember the swallow nests that used to be at our last house, said Ellie. At night, the little family of swallows would all be sitting together in a tight row along the ledge. And the cute little things used to dive bomb us when we went past, added Dad. Just then the phone rang. It was Auntie Penny. She told Mum that she and Grace were planning to ride down and have lunch with them. Grace had a beautiful chestnut quarter horse called Eva. Millie loved watching her do sliding stops, and she loved the beautiful western saddle that Grace rode in. As soon as morning school was over, Kate lit the homeward stove and mixed up a batch of scones. She took the dough out of the bread maker and shaped it into rolls. By the time the family saw the two horses trotting down towards them along the drive, the barn was filled with all sorts of delicious smells. How was your ride? Asked Mum as she stroked Eva's velvety nose. Auntie Penny jumped down from Seth and gave him a pat. Oh, great! The road's pretty narrow, but it was so much fun. And by the smell of it, lunch is going to be well worth the trip. They unsaddled the horses and let them go in the back paddock with Peony. I still can't believe that you're just down the road, said Auntie Penny as they sat round the table. How wonderful to be living in the same town after all these years. The same road, you mean? Added Millie. Yes, who would have thought? And living in a cowshed. Talk about déjà vu. She looked around the room. You've made the barn look so homely, Rose. After lunch, they went for a walk around the land and Mum showed her the newly planted orchard and citrus trees. Penny stood for some time beside the huge pile of firewood. Well, that's going to last you a long time. Very impressive. Mum laughed. Chris would love to hear you say that. He's very proud of his wood pile. Dad did hear. He suddenly appeared from behind the wood and climbed up onto the top of the pile and brandished a piece of firewood as if he were a victorious knight. The black bulls came over to the fence and stared at them. Man alive, said Auntie Penny. The wood pile's not the only massive thing around here. Those bulls are huge. Mum nodded. I know, but they're as quiet as anything. We walk amongst them and they don't mind at all. You should see them when they hear Chris calling them. They come running like a flock of chickens. Big chickens, laughed Auntie Penny. When the time came for them to saddle up their horses and head home, Auntie Penny suggested to Millie that maybe She'd like to bring Peony up to the farm sometime so they could all go riding together. "Oh, yes," said Millie. "I would love that." "All right, let's plan it for next week." Auntie Penny swung up into the saddle and they headed off down the drive. At the corner, she turned around in the saddle and gave a final wave to Millie, who was still standing outside the barn watching them and dreaming of galloping over the hills. Mum was outside hoeing the garden when the phone went half an hour later. "Can you get that?" she called out to Ellie. The next minute, Ellie raced back outside, her face pale. "Mum, Auntie Penny's had an accident and she's lying hurt on the road." Mum dropped the hoe and ran for the car, yelling for Dad. Chris, quick! Penny's been hurt." Millie watched as they sped off up the road. Her heart pounded against her ribcage. "Not Auntie Penny. Oh, please, God, let her be all right." When Kate's cell phone finally beeped, they all jumped. "What does it say?" asked Millie. Katie read it out in a shaky voice. "On way to hospital in ambulance. Badly broken leg. Pray, love Mum." Millie groaned and felt like crying. When they finally heard the sound of the Jeep coming up the drive, they raced outside. Everyone began talking at once. "What happened, Dad? How is she? What's wrong with her?" Dad held up a hand. "Let me come inside first and then I'll tell you." The children sat wide-eyed as Dad told them what had happened. Mum was beside herself as we drove up the road. We didn't know when we might come around a corner and see Auntie Penny lying on the road. We had no idea what we would find. Auntie Penny and Grace were actually almost home when the accident happened. Seth got a fright at a rubbish container on the side of the road and shied. His hooves slipped on the tar seal and he crashed onto his side, crushing Auntie Penny's leg under him. Millie closed her eyes, trying to block out the awful picture that had jumped into her mind. He got up quickly, but Auntie Penny's leg had been broken in about 5 places. Grace managed to catch Seth, who was charging up the road, and Auntie Penny somehow dragged herself off to the side of the road. That's when Grace phoned us. "How long did it take the ambulance to get there?" asked Ellie quietly. It seemed like forever. Auntie Penny was in a lot of pain, but all Mum could do was hold her hand and keep her warm. When we finally heard the siren, it was a wonderful sound. "So, has her leg been all fixed, Daddy?" asked Sam. Dad shook his head. "They put her to sleep to straighten it and put on a temporary cast, but she's going to need further surgery." "Oh, no, poor Auntie Penny," breathed Kate. "Apparently the leg is so swollen and bruised, they might not be able to operate for a week." "A week!" exclaimed Millie. "Seth's a huge horse," said Dad, "and the road is very unforgiving." He rubbed his eyes wearily. What a terrible thing to happen. When Mum appeared at the breakfast table the next morning, she looked wrung out. "It was just so awful seeing Penny in so much pain," she said, with her head in her hands. "There was nothing I could do." She looked at each of the children for a moment. "It's going to be a long, slow process, I'm afraid. It'll be some time before Auntie Penny is walking or riding again." She rubbed her forehead as if she had a headache. Then she looked at Dad. I'm just so glad we're living here now and I can visit her each day. Imagine if we were still in Hamilton. Millie leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes. It didn't matter that she wouldn't be able to ride with Auntie Penny for ages. All she wanted now was for her to get better quickly and not be in so much pain.